What is up? It's Dr. Vibe here, the host of the Dr. Vibe Show, remembering that you are blessed and highly favored, a magnet for miracles and a solution for someone's problem. I am the host of the Dr. Vibe Show, also host of the monthly Google Hangouts for premium members at the Good Men Project. You can check me out there. And the Good Men Project, averaging more than 2.5 million page views a week. So I think go definitely check it out. If you want to join our conversation tonight, you can touch base with me via Twitter at DRVIBESHOW. And our guest, Wendy Knight-Agard, you can catch her at What's Eating You. That's What's with an S at the end. Eating. We all know how to spell eating because we know how to do it. And you, just the letter U. And we're going to be continuing our conversation in regards to eating and emotional eating tonight with Wendy. So we finally have it going on Google Hangouts. The first one was supposed to be like this, but didn't happen, but we found a way to make the second one happen. So live and in living Ottawa red color, we have Wendy Knight-Agard. How are you?
I am excellent, Dr. Vibe. Thanks so much for having me back.
Pleasure's ours, pleasure's mine, pleasure's all our audience, and we're glad to have you back and in living color so people can see and engage with you. So before we get started on our next part of the emotional eating journey, can you just share a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. First and foremost, I like to describe myself as a spiritual being walking this earth in this material body, but also very conscious of my emotional and soul spiritual selves as part of my holistic self. Second to that, I am the wife of an amazing husband and the mother of 2 fabulous teenage girls, and I am a life and wellness coach, and one of the topics that I specialize in is emotional eating, and that's what we're talking about tonight.
Excellent. That is good stuff. And for anyone who wants to catch part 1, it was just posted live yesterday. It's audio only. And you can catch out the first part of the emotional eating journey that Wendy is taking us through. But tonight, she wants to specifically focus on stress and its implications in emotional eating. So, hey, the mic is yours. Go for it. I'm just steering the ship.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Vibe. Well, this one is a huge topic. As you know, I don't think, if I ask you, do you ever experience stress, I think I could put money on the table to say the answer is going to be yes, right?
Yeah, it's just how you handle it.
Exactly. It is exactly how you handle it, because life is going to throw things our way, right? And it's a question of learning, just as you said, how to handle it. But the first point I want to make on stress is that stress isn't really just stress. Okay? So that's really an important thing, that if people don't remember anything else but that tonight, just remember stress isn't really just stress. You know, we use this term stress. I don't know who made it up or where it came from, but we use this term stress, and it's sort of become this big dark cloud that's hanging over our heads. This thing that follows us around, that maybe for some of us we feel like we carry it on our shoulders wherever. But we use this term stress to describe when we're off in some way, or we're not quite right, or we're not, perhaps as relaxed as we'd like to be. Different people will describe it different ways, but often we just use this term stress. Oh, I'm stressed. We call up a friend. I'm stressed. Let's go have a drink. I'm stressed. I got to go for a run. I'm stressed. And we're constantly using this term stress. But I really want to point out to people and dig into this that stress is a catch-all term. I want everyone to start thinking about it as a sort of a broad description of a whole bunch of other things beneath that we want to dig into tonight. Because when we dig into it and we break it down into the pieces that actually make up stress, then it's not so, quote unquote, stressful, because we have a better understanding of what's going on. Does that make some sense?
Absolutely. So let's, I guess if this is a banana, let's peel the banana of stress and let's break it down.
Exactly. It needs to be deconstructed. It needs to be broken down, as you say, into smaller pieces that we can understand, and even into individual feelings. And before we do that, I just want to point out how harmful it is, because, when we verbalize or think, I'm stressed, that's only when it comes into the conscious mind. A lot of times, we are actually experiencing and living with that stress subconsciously, and it's chronic. It's like we're in a constant state of fight or flight if we're not consciously addressing it. So, fight or flight, for those of you who don't understand, is a response from the system when we go into a heightened mode. It was originally designed for safety reasons. For example, if we were being chased by a lion back in the day, or we're in imminent danger, what happens? Our heart rate increases, our muscles tighten up, we get superhuman strength, so to speak. Our muscles get tighter and can actually perform better. We might run faster than we normally do. And that fight or flight response is there for a reason, as I said, when we're in danger. And that's fine if it's only happening for a couple of minutes once in a blue moon. But when we're experiencing this constant stress, we're basically in fight or flight response all the time, even if we're not conscious of it. So our body's in this heightened state. And this is why we have such an issue with high cholesterol and high blood pressure and these problems. It's often related to this fight or flight response, and it becomes chronic. Instead of it happening for 2 or 3 minutes, it happens for a couple of hours, or a couple of days, or weeks, or months, or years. And so you can see how over time, that just wears down the body. And it wears down the mind, of course, too, because it's exhausting, even when we're not conscious of it, to be in that state of fight or flight all the time.
When it comes to root causes of stress, are there specific or common root causes of stress that you found out in your journey in regards to helping others improve themselves? There
are so many. And, if I talk to 100 people and they come and see me and they say, and I used to do this in the clinic, I'd talk about, I'd ask people in their intake, what are their main reasons for coming in? And almost everyone would put down the word stress. But the conversation I would have with them is, what do you mean by stress? What does stress mean to you? So there are a number of root causes, and we'll get into some of those emotions that are there. But many people will describe it different ways. Some people will tell you it's anxiety, worry about something that's going to happen. Other people will tell you it's sadness, and because the sadness hasn't lifted, they're stressed. Other people will tell you it's frustration with something that they want to happen that's not happening fast enough, or frustration in a relationship. Anger, guilt, grief, loss, name the emotion. Many people will be experiencing those emotions, but describe them as stress. And that's our clue to what we talked about earlier when we talked about wanting to break it down. We want to get into those feelings that I just described. Whatever words you use are okay. It's not that there's one finite list that I have that I say, oh, if you're not feeling that, you're not feeling stressed. If you're feeling stressed, you know how you feel. The key, though, is to break it down into these individual emotions. Okay? Make sense?
Yeah, it does. Now, when it comes to stress, just an interesting conversation piece. Yeah. Is it hereditary?
Ah, that's a good question. Yes. And the short answer is yes, but there's a but. Okay? Because even though we're all born with what we call in the Heilkunst word miasms, or inherited predispositions. Those predispositions can be physical predispositions, or they can be emotional or soul-spiritual predispositions. For example, I'm more likely to get stressed than my husband on most things, right? I'm far more of a sensitive individual than he is. So where did I get that? Well, I was born with it. It's part of my character structure. It's part of how I came into the world. We are just different people when it comes to taking in outside factors, processing them, and dealing with them. Okay? So yes, absolutely. It can very much be inherited and something that you quote-unquote come in with. But the but is, we can all learn to deal with that. I deal with stress infinitely better than I did 20 years ago, before I started becoming involved in living a more conscious life and improving my health and studying and so on. So these are techniques that anyone can learn. It's not here for, the few special. It's true that there are some people that come into the world and they just have a more easygoing nature, and lucky them. Right? But for the rest of us, people like me, I've had to learn how to deal with stress, how to really recognize it instantly when I'm experiencing it. And even if I'm in a situation, let's say with a client or out somewhere where I can't take a moment to actually deal with it, I can make the mental note to come back to it after I leave that situation and start to break it down and deal with it. So does that make sense on the inherited question?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, just wanting to go further in regards to the emotions that are linked with stress, can you share with our audience about that?
Okay. There's, as I said, there's so many. And so the key is to become clear on them. We've all got to learn to, and this is where, I think we touched on this in the first session, this idea of responsibility when it comes to really managing our health in a holistic way. It's easy to say, if I were to write down a list of emotions that come with stress, and I were to ask you to check all the boxes that you thought applied to you, well, that would make it easy for you, and I could do that as a starting point. But the key is to simply immerse ourselves in the situation that caused us stress. And that might sound counterintuitive, because our nature is to run the other way, isn't it? When we encounter something we don't like, or a situation that we feel is, that we judge, I should say, as negative, we want to run the other way. We want to suppress it. And this is what happens when people say, oh, I'm feeling stressed. They recognize that something's off, but in fact, the true emotions are being suppressed because they haven't dealt with it. And so what we want to do is take the specific situation from that day or week, as soon as you feel yourself feeling stressed, and break it down. So let's use an example again. Let's say that I'm back in my corporate days, and I'm reporting to a boss who asks me to do something that I'm uncomfortable doing, and it's causing a lot of stress. Okay, so how do I want to deal with that? I want to be able to sit down quietly. Perhaps I journal at the end of the evening, and if journaling is not for everybody, I can still take just a few minutes to stop and think about my day. Stop and think about, that tape that we have running in our heads where we're telling someone off in our heads, but we're not really telling them off because we can't, because they're our boss. We want to capture that and say, okay, what is it that I wanted to say to that person and why? What's going on there? We want to really steep in the situation instead of what so many of us do and say, oh, I'm stressed, let me just forget about the workday. I'm going to go have a beer or a bag of chips, or, tonight's going to be wing night because I deserve it because I've had a stressful day.
Sure.
Right? That's what we all do. So you want to steep in that situation. You want to go back into it. You want to feel the trigger, the emotion that happened in the moment that perhaps you couldn't act on.
Right.
Right? So you want to put yourself right back in that uncomfortable situation in your mind, and just sit with it for a few minutes.
But Wendy, that's not easy, Wendy. Like you're sharing, you're saying to people, go back into that situation that you don't want no part of. That's easier said than done.
It's so much easier said than done. Here's the one thing I can absolutely, unequivocally promise you and your listeners: it gets easier. At first, it absolutely feels brutal. You think, why would I want to relive that, man? I'm finished with work, right? I'm at home now. It's time to forget about it. But I'm going somewhere with this. There's a method to my madness.
Okay.
So, yeah, you sit there and you steep in it, whether it's journaling or it's just in your mind, and you relive it. And it's the reliving of it and by the way, the reliving usually only takes 2-3 minutes. This doesn't have to be a long exercise. You're not going to spend.
Yeah, but most people are going to take long. If they visit back, they're going to take longer than 2 or 3 minutes. You know that. So you must be saying after a period of time you get better at this.
Well, exactly. The first time you do it, you may find yourself stewing on it. Okay.
Sure.
But as you practice this, it doesn't have to take a long time. You can literally send yourself into that, feel the emotion, and start to do these next steps. So the first thing is to feel that emotion. The reason you need to feel it is that it's the feeling that is going to bring up from, I don't know if the camera can see it, but down from your gut, up into your conscious mind, the clarity on which emotion or emotions are really bothering you. Okay? If you don't feel it, if you suppress it, how are you going to get the clarity? right? I'll give you a really common example that I have personally experienced so many times, and I've seen it so many times with clients, and that is anger. Okay, so let's go back to that situation. I'm at work, my boss asks me to do something, and I'm really angry about it. So I come home and I'm angry about this, I'm angry about that, and I'm really feeling all this anger and tension in my neck and what have you. But when I sit with it for a while, when I revisit the anger, what I have found comes up so often with myself and my clients is that it's actually the hurt behind the anger that is the core issue causing us stress. Most people never get to the hurt behind the anger. They're stuck in anger, and the reason is they're just in react mode. They shoved it down, came home, had the bag of chips, and forgot about it, or tried to forget about it. Of course, they didn't, because you can't forget about it unless you process it. So by sitting with it, we get that clarity that, oh, actually, yes, I was angry, but what's really upset me, what's really, what I'm really carrying around with me for days and weeks and whatever is the hurt. Whatever my boss said, maybe it was embarrassing, maybe it hurt me because I felt that maybe he or she thought I didn't know something that I clearly knew, whatever it is. This is critical, because how can you release the anger? How can you process it if you don't have a handle on the full gamut of emotions at play? When hurt is really the root issue. Remember you asked me earlier, what are the root issues? The roots are going to be different for everybody, so the trick is to learn how to find out for yourself in any given situation what the root emotion or emotions really are. Do you see why that would be valuable, even if a little
Absolutely, and it makes a lot of sense. Interesting, you were talking about anger, and
yeah.
one of my allies, a gentleman named the Stalgent down in Virginia, he made a very interesting quote a while back that the easiest emotion for most men, or for many men, not for most, for many men, is anger.
Yeah, yeah, and I would totally agree with that. And one of the reasons I would suggest that is the case is that to admit we're hurt, even to ourselves, is a much more vulnerable position to be in, isn't it? An anger position is more of an assertive position. Even if we don't act on it, our intellectual mind says, oh, I'm angry. It's more of an assertive emotion. Being hurt is more of a receptive emotion. It's like we've received something, and something has impinged upon us deeply. And that message, because of our cultural upbringing and all of it, goes up into the intellectual mind, and we say, "Ooh, I don't want to go there. That feels vulnerable. I feel raw if I admit that I'm hurt." But the only way to truly process that anger and let go of it is to get at the hurt behind it, because the hurt's the root cause, and it's no different than going out on your lawn in the summertime and chopping off the heads of those dandelions, and they're going to be right back the next morning, right? Because you've got to dig out the root. At least then you'll have maybe a week with dandelions in our climate.
Right? Yeah, I want to link in regards to this stress and eating.
Yes. Yes.
So talk to that point. Give us some conversation in regards to stress and eating habits.
Okay. So now we're in that situation. We come home. We haven't processed the anger, let's say. What are we likely to do? We're likely to try to find some intellectually harmless way of suppressing that unprocessed emotion. Eating. Food it's what I call these days, it's like the acceptable addiction. Because if we're addicted to alcohol, somebody is going to, we hope, if they love us, intervene. If we're addicted to recreational drugs, we hope that somebody who loves us is going to intervene. But food, it should be the same for food. And sometimes I think it is. I think some of us maybe have had interventions with people we love around food. But I really want people to look at how food becomes an addiction and an emotional crutch when we're not doing the types of things I was just describing, when we're not learning how to effectively process our emotions. And you know, we touched on, well, actually, before I go on to that, I just want to stop and make sure that that connection is sound for you. Is
Fine
that,
with me.
yeah?
That's
Okay.
keep on going.
Okay. Remember last week when we touched on the idea of comfort foods and reaching for those highly refined carbohydrates and sugars so that we get that emotional high, that endorphin high to deal with the emotion?
True.
There's that connection again. When the emotion's not processed, when it's sitting bubbling within us like this boiling pot that, you know, is about to boil over, we're likely to reach for the comfort foods because we want to feel better. What happens when we reach for the comfort foods? Now we have a physical reaction that contributes right back to the emotional issue. And I'll just remind you how that works. So I'm upset, I'm angry, I come home and I say, you know what? Tonight I'm having a bowl of ice cream because I'm upset and angry and I'm going to treat myself. So I eat the ice cream. What happens? I get an insulin spike. The insulin spike gives me those endorphins and kind of makes me feel good for a short time. But shortly after that insulin spike, there must and always is an insulin drop. So we have a spike and then a drop. Guess what happens? When we drop, the drop usually brings us lower emotionally than where we started. So if we started here, got a spike, and then it drops, we actually end up feeling lower emotionally than where we started. What happens then? We say, oh, I need another hit. I need some more. Now I need some chips. Or the next morning we wake up and we need, you know, a big highly refined muffin or something. We have another hit. We get an insulin spike, and this up and down spike is constantly happening. Doesn't that sound like an addiction?
Does to me.
Yeah, exactly. So we started with this unprocessed emotion. We reached for the quote-unquote harmless solution to that, which is food. We get the insulin spike because we never reach for broccoli in that situation because we're looking for the endorphin high. And now we're in this cycle. Boom, 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 boom. And now our body is engaged in the process. And so we've got an emotional cycle and a physical addiction cycle together, and we're in a downward spiral. And when you're using a general term like stress to describe your life without breaking that down and breaking it off in easy to understand bites, this cycle just starts to get out of control and continue indefinitely.
So when you have clients coming to What's Eating You, and they're saying they're stressed, what are some of the things in an initial consultation do you have them discuss with you?
Well, first, I ask them to give me a couple of situations, just like we ran through here. I say, well, what's stressing you out? And they'll give me a short phrase, oh, work, you know, or my relationship, oh, kids, you know, my teenagers, whatever. And I'll say, well, what about work? Oh, well, I don't like my job. And I will just continue and continue and continue in my questioning and in the conversation until we get really clear on a core issue. Okay? And then we start to work with that issue. The thing is, like I said earlier, once I've done that with someone a few times, I can teach them to do it. Anyone can learn to do it. Okay? Once you get good at sitting down, it's really that initial part. It's like anything else. It's like the first day of a cleanse.
Right.
Or getting yourself to the gym, right? But once you're on the bike, it feels good. But sometimes getting there is the hard part.
Absolutely.
It's the same thing here. When I said to you, revisit the situation, you had the same reaction we've all had the first time we heard that. No way. Why would I torture myself with that?
No, well, no. I'm just people in general. I'm not including myself in that. I'm just saying I'm speaking for the people here. I'm not speaking for many people out there. Hold on now. Easy now, because I know a lot of people say, Dr. Vibe, you're like that? I have my ways of dealing with stress.
Okay, got it. You're speaking for the people because you know your audience, and you know, and I know that too, for people who simply haven't been taught this, that does seem like a bit of a scary thought. So,
sure.
Right? So that's one way that I deal with it. Another way that I deal with it is to teach people this process. So I just touched on the first step of it. The first step is to revisit that situation, Try to really allow the true feeling to come out. But then the second step, after I said revisit the situation, once we get clear on the emotion, so let's say it's hurt and we're feeling vulnerable, then we need to revisit the hurt. We just need to feel it for a minute, for 2 minutes. If we're journaling, just write the line, I am hurt because. Okay, that's your revisiting. When you do that, what happens is you feel it fully instead of shutting it down. That's what we normally do. We shut down that hurt. We don't even acknowledge it. It's bubbling in our subconscious and never even reaches our conscious mind. So when you feel that fully, guess what happens? You can release it. Right?
Yeah, and it sounds, and correct me if I'm wrong here, and often I am, that the key to this is thought process.
Yes, it is. It's thought process with allowing the feeling. We have to allow the feeling because, in our Western world, it's all about the thoughts, right? And that's okay. Obviously, our intellectual mind serves a purpose and is very valuable. But the other part of that thought process, so the thought process tells you the steps and says, oh, I'm not dealing with what I need to deal with. But then we have to actually feel the emotion. And here's some simple proof. If this all sounds crazy to your listeners, here's some simple proof that this works. Imagine the last time you saw a 3-year-old have a tantrum, get really upset about something, like somebody took their toy.
Are you talking about actual 3-year-olds or people in their 30s and 40s acting like 3-year-old tantrums? I want to just make that clear.
An actual 3-year-old in biology.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Just want to clarify.
No problem. A child. What happens when a young child is upset? Everybody knows it, don't they?
Sure.
Yeah. A young child who's upset about someone taking their toy will let everyone around them know it, no matter where they are. Right?
Absolutely.
They will have a tantrum. They will cry. They will be sad. They'll tell you everything about how they feel.
I want to make clear now because you're making me think of some people I know in their 30s or 40s. So I'm just trying to keep it down to the 3-year-old. But keep on going.
Well, it doesn't mean it couldn't happen to a 30-year-old.
There, 30, 40-year-old, 50-year-old. But we'll just focus on the 3-year-old. Keep on going.
Absolutely, absolutely. But we see this all the time in children. When they have an emotion, they express it fully. Do they say, "Oh, I have that emotion, but I'm gonna suppress it"? No, they feel it. They don't just think about it. They feel it. They express it with every fiber of their being, don't they?
True. Very true.
And look what happens 5 minutes after. What does a kid look like 5 minutes after they're done?
Like nothing happened.
There you go. There's your proof that when you fully process an emotion, it's like it was never there in the first place.
So what you're saying then is, if you have one of these moments, you do one of two things. You either go to you, or you look at a 3-year-old.
Exactly.
There you go.
When in doubt as to what to do, think of how nature intended it. This is what I'm saying. I don't want your listeners to think this is some convoluted, confusing, highly intellectual process that I'm trying to share with you. What I'm saying is this is what nature intended, and every single one of us is capable of doing this and of learning how to do it. And all that's happened is that 3-year-old then went into kindergarten, right? And the tantrums were no longer allowed in kindergarten, were they? Because then they were going to get a note sent home.
Absolutely.
And then suddenly, while we were doing something perfectly constructive, which is teaching that child that they can't just have a tantrum anytime, anywhere, we only taught half the lesson. We didn't teach them how to effectively process their emotions. So we grow up, we get older and older and older. Expressing those emotions become less and less tolerated from everyone around us, to the point where we become 30 and 40-year-olds and we don't know how to process our emotions. We have forgotten what God gave us, what nature intended. Do we have to do it in a totally destructive tantrum way, the way a 3-year-old would? Of course not. And we've probably all worked with some people like that do that. That's why you were making those jokes. They just have a tantrum.
No, they weren't jokes. It's the actual facts. But you can take it as a joke. But no problem.
Okay, I stand corrected. But that's what I mean. We all know some people like that.
Yeah.
Who basically do act like a 3-year-old and sound off and have a tantrum, right? Because they don't know how to deal with it. And so, of course, we're not saying that's constructive either as adults. And once you get into school, you have to learn how to keep a lid on it for a while. But
absolutely.
Right,
yep.
Right? But the second piece of that is, then when we have a moment alone or a moment with our journal, we have a constructive way now of dealing with that emotion. And by feeling it fully, that's the part that nobody wants to do, but by feeling it fully, we can release it. We can let it go. So now the stress is not this strange black cloud that we're carrying around with us. You know, most people are operating, if you take my glass of water here, they're operating with a full glass of water. It's like it's at the brim. And just one teeny tiny thing needs to happen, and before you know it, that cup is overflowing, right? And that's why people are always stressed, because they never take the drops out of the cup. Because all of these emotional events that have happened over time have just built up inside of them, like those dead balls of energy I mentioned last time. They've built up and up and up and up. And so even when we're not conscious of the stress, it's often still there. And that is going to manifest in many ways, but one of them is emotional eating, which is why so many people, even if they're taught how to eat healthily, can't do it, because it's a mind game.
One of the things that you've mentioned a few times through our conversation tonight is journaling. What are the benefits, in your opinion, of journaling, whether it's in regards to stress, overcoming stress, overcoming emotional eating, overcoming challenging emotions?
I have learned that journaling is extremely powerful. There is something about putting pen to paper, and by the way, it's even more powerful when you do it the old-fashioned way. Some of your younger viewers are going to look at me cross-eyed, but it's even more powerful when you do it the old-fashioned way with a pen and a paper. And the reason is that is more physical. So you're really bringing that thought and that feeling from your mind into the physical material world. The computer is more virtual, isn't it? It's just not as physical as taking pen to paper. So that journaling process, what it does is it allows you, it's part of your processing. It's a tool. Think of it like a tool. It's a tool to help you process your emotions. The other thing about journaling is that you can do it on your own. You don't have anyone interrupting you. You don't have anyone looking at you with a look of judgment in their eyes when you tell them that you are angry or hurt by your boss. There's no repercussion. There's no judgment. There's just a simple mind dump, if you will, from someone who's being open and honest with themselves. So one, I'd say it's a tool, and two, I'd say it's one way. There's no judgment, no fear of judgment, and that makes it really powerful.
Excellent. So we've covered a lot in our next part of the journey, part 2, in regards to emotional eating, and you've really focused on this aspect of stress and overcoming stress and emotional eating. Before we let you go this evening, do you have any final words you'd like to share about this subject?
Well, I like to give people little breakthrough activities. So I would suggest to the listeners, the next week or so, over the next week, whenever you hear your inner voice saying, "Oh, I'm stressed," or you hear yourself talking to a colleague at work or your spouse or anyone saying the word stress, I really want you to question it. I want you to say to yourselves later or whenever you have a moment, wait a minute, stress isn't really stress. What is this really? And go through those 3 steps. Number 1, go back to the situation, pick one, there's probably many, but pick a situation that's causing you stress. Relive it for a couple of minutes or journal about it. Number 2 is to allow that true feeling. Get clear on what true feelings And again, there's no judgment here. You can just write anger, hurt, guilt, whatever it is. Then take the top 2 or 3 feelings in that list and sit with them. Close your eyes, whatever you need to do. Feel them fully. You may, if it's hurt, for example, you may feel some tears coming. That's the processing. That's just a physical manifestation of you effectively processing that emotion. It's wonderful. If it's anger, you might feel your body tense up. That's okay. Some of you may know, that a popular thing to do in yoga or other relaxation classes is to tense the muscles and then relax them. And why do they ask you to do that? Because by consciously tensing them and then relaxing them, you're actually relaxing some of the tension that was already there all day. Okay? So whatever you're feeling in that step 2, just go with it, allow it. And then what you're going to find is, poof, it's gone. And when it's gone, you don't need to feel the stress, and you don't need to feel the stress. You don't need to eat emotionally in a misguided attempt to try to address that stress. So go through those steps, everyone, this week. Try them out and see what happens.
Nice. I like that. Professor Wendy giving homework. I like that. Very nice.
I didn't call it homework. I specifically refrained from the word homework because nobody likes homework.
Well, how about Professor Wendy giving you work on yourself?
You still use the word work.
Okay.
It's a
improving yourself.
There you go. There you go.
All right. If people want to get in touch with you, what are the best ways for them to connect with you?
Well, there's a couple ways they can do that. They can follow me on Twitter at @what'seatingyou. Again, you just spelled with the letter U. They can look for me on Facebook. Just type in What's Eating You into the search bar, and my page will pop up, or you can type in my name, Wendy Knight-Agard, and you'll find me that way. They can, of course, get the free emotional eating videos at what'seatingyou.com. They can enjoy free podcasts by searching my name on iTunes or going to wendyknight-agardshow.com. And the other thing I really want to mention for tonight is that I've created a special cloned page of my product page specifically for the Dr. Vibe audience, for those of you who think you may need a little additional help. And this page is called Mind Secrets to Lasting Weight Loss, and it's about emotional eating, helping people lose weight and maintain a healthier weight by getting a handle on their emotional eating. And there's a special price on there of $197 for the 8-week course for the Dr. Vibe audience. So anyone who wants to take a look over that.
Yay!
Yay, Dr. Vibe!
There
Dr.
you
Vibe
go.
gets special treatment. So
Wonderful.
Anyone who wants some help with that can also go there. And of course, you can email me directly. Feel free anytime. Wendy@what'seatingyou.com.
Excellent. And all that information is on the post for this conversation. So you can watch it and just look below the screen, and you'll see all that information to connect with Wendy. Hey, I want to ask, you said you've got something that you just found out about in the last hour or so. Do share this success with us.
Oh, yes. Just before we started our call, thank you. Just before we started our call, I was asked to participate in an online international summit on mind-body connection. I wish I could give you a URL, but I don't have it yet. Yet. Don't worry, I will happily share that with you. This is going to be an amazing project done by a woman who is a runner, and through her running, she learned how this physicality was affecting her mind and her thought process and emotions, and she asked me to participate because of my work in this area of the mind-body connection. But there are going to be some amazing participants in that online summit, so definitely I'll keep you posted on that information. Thanks for asking.
No problem. We are jacked, and we always like celebrating positive success, so I think that's outstanding. How did this lady find out about you?
Well, you know what? We met at a event last summer where we were both working on our online marketing projects. And so we heard about each other's product and spent some time together just exploring, our passions and what was important to us and how we try to, constantly evolve our consciousness. And so we just connected and got a sense, I guess, of what each other was up to and what was important to each other. And so she felt my work would be a good fit for her project.
Well, congratulations, and it just always shows what I share with people. It's all about relationships.
Oh, it is.
It's all about a relationship. So that's fantastic, Wendy. We are jacked about that. We are jacked that you've been with us twice, and you're going to be with us again next week. So looking forward to that. And as always, it's the Dr. Vibe Show. I am the host and producer of the Dr. Vibe Show. If you want to touch base with me, just go to thedrvibeshow.com, and all the contact information you need about me is right there on the page. Also, you can check me out on a regular at thegoodmenproject.com. I have my own authors page there, and you can check out a number of these conversations that we have on the Dr. Vibe Show. And check them out. Good Men Project, over 2.5 million page views a week. Actually, last week they had 11.8 million page views.
That is amazing. Congratulations.
That is outstanding. Yeah, so, well, hey, it's all about the people who are contributing, and it's absolutely fantastic. They're now regarded as one of the top 350 websites in America, and it's a great honor for them, and I just feel humbled, blessed, and highly favored to be part of that. As always, remember, you're blessed and highly favored. You're a magnet for miracles and your solution for someone's problem. Thank you for all your support. Without you, we couldn't do it. As always, God bless, peace be well, and keep the faith, and good night.